Under utilities, you will find that there's a few items down here that you may have seen before, but this is where a lot of the structural things happen within the site. So, for instance, under UI macros, here's where I bring in the different nav bars. So here's nav bar 1, here's option 2, style 2 nav bar. This is probably the most used macro right here, the CMS Lite styles. And here's where what I'm doing here is calling in all of the items from the configuration and creating them as like sort of inline styles. So if you ever are looking for where that's coming in or you want to add another feature, you can drop it in there. But a lot of I'm kind of doing an inline style for some of those items. But any macro that you want, so I have like, breadcrumbs and search and some of those things. I'll get into those in a minute. They're all in here. Anything around favorites is in here. So if you wanted to add another table, you would add, like I have the CMS Lite favorites include on some of the content types. Then you'll see it from there. Properties. So under properties, I've kind of created a list here of specific things in general for the sites. Just properties that can be included in code, so you don't have to go look for them everywhere. So on the knowledge search results page or the catalog search results page, I've got different icons that I'm using. If you want to change the width of the chat or the height of the chat modal, this little guy, you can change it there. When I get into search results and I get into email, so here's the icon that I was talking about for knowledge. And then here you'll see that there's 3, but if I just did nothing, if I just did all results, if I just hit enter, you'll get all results. You'll notice that it goes to 10 pages and then goes to the next, and I'm controlling that from here. The number of pages to show, and then the number of results is 5. So I'm only showing 5 at a time, and then 10. So you can control all that from here. I have a URL to the main knowledge base and the main catalog, and then the sysID for the chat icon. And I've referenced some of those in the configuration doc too, and specifically around chat. But you basically want to connect it to a chat queue or a connect queue under collaborate. It implies that you have collaborate on and chat off. I believe it's in the document. But here's where all the properties are. So if you're looking for where that is, it's all under properties. Under UI scripts, I've got a bunch of stuff. I've got, some Bootstrap stuff, the cookies, some data tables, things that I do. Because specifically underneath this gear, you'll see that there's this my requests, approvals, etc. And I'll get into that in another video. But if you wanted to add another file or another JavaScript file, you can throw it in here and then just make sure that you add it to your layout like so. And it's all it's relative, right? So there's no slash or anything. Then we have favorites. So you'll notice as you kind of go through, like I have some favorites on mine already, but if I go through and I wanted to, if I want to do like a search for email, I could favorite this. It already is favorited, but I will favorite it again. And it works for knowledge and for catalog. So if I wanted to do a service request item as well, I could favorite this, which it already is. And then it doesn't, so you have to, if you click it and then refresh it, then you'll see a difference in terms of how it shows up here. So if I change it, I can refresh it. And now my favorites are listed. So what's interesting about it is what it does is on this side, it's relative. So if I delete an article or delete a catalog item or delete a user, all of their items will clear out of this favorites table as well. But you can see all the items underneath favorites. And lastly is content types. Now this is kind of a big deal when it comes to CMS because how CMS renders any table within the site is through content types. So it matches up, for instance, knowledge. If I go now to a knowledge article, you'll notice in the URL, I've got knowledge detail, sysparm document key equals KB knowledge. So what it's doing is just, this doesn't even really matter as much as this does. This is telling it, go look in the KB knowledge table for for this sysID. So then what it does is goes and looks for the content type for the CMS site and renders it back. So this top area is for search results, and this bottom area is for the actual detail template. So you'll see here that I've got some breadcrumb stuff in there, and then I've got the let's see, this is the actual frame that's being popped to bring back this different UI page. So KB View CMS Lite is a UI page, and I will make sure to add UI pages to this list as well. Although there's not that many, so you could probably just go find it under UI pages. But I have a custom one there to kind of make it look like this. So, and it is iframed, even though it doesn't look like it. I'm hiding some stuff and clearing some stuff out just so that you can get some of these things like the authoring and the stars if you really wanted it, and the likes and all that. So that's where all that is. So content type. So if you ever open up an item within the CMS that that's blank, it's because you're missing the content type for that specific site. So just make sure that you have whatever site, sysapprover or whatever is there, so that you can get to the item that you need. It's one of the most confusing pieces about this, to be honest, is content type. So, reach out if you have any questions. Lastly, what I want to get into are some of the features that we have. And so I'm gonna kind of do individual little videos for some of them because they're quite large or can be quite complicated. But some of the features that I'll just talk about in here are things like, we already looked at chat. So chat is being controlled as this modal, but all I did there was I went to collaborate, queues, and I grabbed the sysID of the queue that I want. I come back to my CMS Lite, and under properties, I put in that sysID. So that's it for chat, very simple. Live feed, we already showed you, is just it's a iframe. And so for the CMS Lite, I've got, this iframe right here. And all I'm doing is going into live feed as the URL. I've got a fixed size here just so that it plays nicely. This login, logout is pretty simple, but it's all being controlled from the UI macro for the nav bars. So if you want to go change those, remove them, whatever, you can just go in. You'll see under CMS Lite nav bar that there's a right underneath the picture. There's this guy. And I'm referencing a message of CMS Lite. So if I wanted to just change the messages, I could come over here and change the term. So that's it as far as login, logout. The cart itself is fairly simple. It's just the out-of-box kind of iframe of the cart. And so it's, there's not a whole lot to it. The one challenge that you have to configure is this continue shopping, because it is going to reference order things, which we don't have as a page. So you may want to change that to reference whatever, service catalog list or whatever that you want. And so that's one item that you have to be aware of. You can either hide it or just change it as you're configuring your catalog. And I think I showed you, I'm going to show you just a few other small things, and I'm going to get into some larger items like type ahead and catalog and knowledge. I showed you the slider where all that comes from. You can also use this same block wherever. You can use it on a different page. You can create a new one, a new block, and reference a different menu item if you wanted to. You'll see it all in that dynamic block. This my items is fairly simple to understand once you see it as a code. Right now I've got incident requests and favorites and approvals. This is a data table. So datatables.net shows you where all that is. But if I come over here to my dynamic blocks, you will see a my items block. Under the my items block, I've got, incidents, requests, approvals, favorites. And then I've got the actual 4 items here. So I'm referencing other content blocks to bring in the actual values of incidents and requests, partly because there's just a lot of queries. So if I go back to dynamic blocks, you'll see like the incidents tab is right here. And so here's where I'm calling the table headers, and then I rope through and query through. I also do closed, and then down here you can kind of define, no open incidents or whatever. So it fairly straightforward, but that's where all the code is for this page. So if you wanted to add another tab, you would just go first of all to the dynamic blocks and go to your My Items block, and you would add the new LI and then the new LI or the new div tag down here. Make sure you just change the ID, and then bring in whatever content block you want. Just bring in the new sysid, and you can just grab one of the other ones and copy the same format, but just use a different sysid. So that's how the My Items works. And slider, no, just looking at my list here. Oh, and then footer. So footer is fairly simple. How this is the last two here are lists. So you'll notice under the layout that I'm referencing at the very bottom of the layout, I'm referencing these three blocks. One is content block programmatic, one is content block lists, and the other is content block lists. So you can change these to be whatever you want, but basically the first one is actually just straight up a dynamic block. So if I go in here, I believe it's called footer other sites. Yep. And it's just straight HTML. You can put whatever you want in here. It's not linking to anything right now because it's typically, whatever you guys want it to be. So that's what this is. These don't actually link to anything, but you can put whatever you want down here. You can put an image down here. You can make this an HTML block. You can do whatever you want. Most viewed and featured items are just lists. So under most viewed, here's featured items and most viewed. So these are the two right here. So if I wanted to go into like featured items, I could define whatever I want them to be. I think I'm just kind of generically doing it, and I limit it to 5. And then there's always a type that's associated with lists, and this is where you control how it looks. So that's about it as far as those items. The last couple of videos are going to be about type ahead search, the catalog, and knowledge. And maybe one last video, just a features video. So thanks for sticking around.